For this project, I chose aviation in the United States prior to 1877. I have around 13 slides because there's a bit of information to talk about on each slide. I also inserted the slideshow into Google Vids so I could do a voiceover. The slideshow itself will be attached under the assignment. Why did I choose aviation? I chose aviation because I want to be a pilot. Aviation has also always interests me. I at first wanted to fly attack helicopters or planes, but with my vision issues, I would never be allowed to fly anything that has artillery. So I decided, why not change it up? I want to fly, I knew that. But let's fly commercial planes or do helicopter SNR.
Why is aviation significant on a state-federal level? War-related air travel is good for war, transporting soldiers, or stuff. General air travel allows for people to be more mobile and allows for more opportunities. Some major airports in Ohio include the Akron-Canton Airport, Cleveland-Hopkins Airport, John Glenn Columbus International Airport, and more. Many more. A quote from Haldane Dodd, Chief of Air Transport Action Group, also called ATAG, speaks for the significance of aviation on a state or federal level. She says, quote, "Aviation helps drive the development of the modern world. A network of airlines, airports, and air traffic management organizations link major cities and small communities 24 hours a day with increasingly advanced aircraft." Kites first appeared in America in 1752. During June of that same year, Benjamin Franklin supposedly, with the aid of his son, flew a flat kite fitted with a pointed wire and a silk sail during a thunderstorm. Somehow, both father and son avoided electrocution as the metal key attached to the flying line became electrified. It is said that Franklin proved that lightning was a natural phenomenon called electricity, not the wrath of the gods. One immediate and practical outcome of the experiment was Franklin's invention of the lightning rod, although sources vary on whether or not Franklin's kite was actually struck by lightning. Observation balloons and their use in the Civil War. Both the Union and Confederate armies used balloons for reconnaissance during the American Civil War, marking the first time that balloons were used in the United States for spying on the enemy. Thaddeus Lowe had seen the usefulness of balloon observations when he crash-landed in South Carolina on a flight from Cincinnati, Ohio. One of his supporters, Murat Halstead, an editor of the Cincinnati Daily Commercial, wrote to the U.S. Treasury Secretary Solomon P. Chase and suggested that the United States establish a balloon corps under Lowe's command. This corps would provide aerial reconnaissance for the Union armies. 5 balloons of 7 were made by Lowe and used for reconnaissance. The Confederate Army also formed a smaller version of the Balloon Corps. In 1862, Captain John Randolph Bryan offered to oversee the building and deployment of an observation balloon. This balloon consisted of a cotton envelope coated with varnish. Unlike the hydrogen-filled Union balloons, it was a Montgolfier filled with hot air. Bryan launched the balloon on April 13, 1862, over Yorktown, Virginia. Although the balloon was rotating on its tether while in the air, Bryan managed to sketch a map of Union positions. The second Confederate balloon was constructed of multicolor silk and was gas-filled in Richmond, Virginia, and then carried to the battlefield by tying it to a train. In 1862, when the battlefields moved too far from the railroad, it was attached to a boat and carried down the James River, where the tug attached to the boat ran aground and was captured. Called a silk dress balloon, although not made with dresses. Another silk dress balloon was made and went into service at Richmond during the fall of 1862. It provided aerial observations from its position until 1863, when it escaped in a high wind and was captured by Union troops. The image on the left is Lowe's balloon called the Intrepid, and the name means fearless or bold. For this slide, I quoted one of my sources that went further in depth on Lowe's childhood. The quote states, "Intellectually curious and driven from a young age, Lowe had no formal education, but demonstrated an appetite for learning, which hinted at his future career as an inventor. At the age of 18, he attended a lecture on the subject of lighter-than-air gases, and so impressed the professor, Dinglehoff, with his enthusiasm that Dinglehoff offered to take the young Lowe on a lecture circuit with him as an assistant." There are no pictures or portraits of Lowe during his childhood. During Lowe's life, at early adulthood, he became an important builder of balloons during the Civil War. He began to build bigger balloons during his marriage. Lowe, just 1 week after meeting Léontine Augustine Gaston, he decided to marry her. They, over the course of their marriage, had 10 children. Lowe was a major contributor to the Civil War. He ran a test from Cincinnati, Ohio to Washington, D.C., but during this, his balloon went off course and he landed in Unionville, South Carolina. After his crash landing in Unionville, the Confederate-sided government's interest peaked and balloons began being used for reconnaissance against the Confederate Army. Despite Lowe building balloons for the Civil War, none of his balloons were ever damaged in combat. After the Civil War, Lowe's late life consisted of him moving to California and making a fortune with building and selling ice maker machines. He passed in his daughter's home in 1913 at the age of 81. John Wise was a Pennsylvanian balloonist who brought his balloon in 1852 to Mansfield, Ohio. He hosted events with acrobats to amuse the citizens and crowds that would form. His balloons were used in the first U.S. airmail service. What happened to John Wise? Wise disappeared in 1879 on a balloon voyage that supposedly went wrong. All passengers and their bodies, along with the balloon, were discovered with the exception of Wise himself. What is the relevance to Ohio? These people, the people I focused on for the duration of my slideshow, were not from Ohio. There wasn't much information on the aviation history in Ohio from this time period. However, there were people who chose Ohio to start their careers in aviation, to prove that although man does not have wings, we can still fly. Despite this issue, all of these people had connections to Ohio. John Wise used his balloon for entertainment in the city square of Mansfield, Ohio, before the very thing that made him famous caused his demise. Thaddeus Lowe made history starting in Cincinnati, with his trip ending a little too soon in Unionville, South Carolina. Although he planned to cross the Atlantic, Lowe traveled around 550 miles, which at that time was a massive amount of distance to travel. Both of these people had direct connections to Ohio and our history.